Hello, welcome to PlayStation Access. My name's Rob, and by now you've played the Final Fantasy VII Remake playable demo about 47 times, yes? Me too. I can't help myself. Ever since an extended hands-on with the game last week, everything that isn't Final Fantasy VII Remake, I've just basically cancelled. Listening to the radio on my morning drive to work, now it's the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack. Chilling out with some casual Skyrim before bed? No, let's play the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo again. Even this week's Friday feature is entirely devoted to the game. I am not sorry. Specifically, we're looking at how and why Final Fantasy VII Remake has evolved from the 1997 original. If you've played the demo, you've no doubt spotted some of these differences yourself, but in this video, I really want to try and understand what these changes add to the experience. This is one of the best loved video games of all time, after all. Tweaking stuff takes guts. But from what I've seen and played, the development team at Square Enix has absolutely nailed it. Here are 7 differences between Final Fantasy VII Remake and the 1997 original. We have both A, noticed, and B, absolutely love. The first thing that hits you when you boot up Final Fantasy VII Remake, aside from how amazing the fabric on Aerith's dress looks, seriously, look at how it moves, amazing, is how expansive the game is. Storming the #1 maker Reactor with Avalanche in the original was, and still is, one of the best video game openings ever. The images here are seared into my memory. Cloud, Barrett, Jesse, Wedge and Biggs, boring into the dark, pulsing depths of the reactor. The rhythmic, mechanical score making you feel as though you've been swallowed by some kind of steampunk monster. When you look at the original Final Fantasy VII, it's amazing how evocative this place is. Look at it really, a collection of sprites scurrying across a pre-rendered isometric backdrop. And yet this combination of music and imagery lights a firework that rockets through your imagination and explodes into a rainbow of colourful interpretation. The idea of the Mako Reactor is conveyed so effectively by these backdrops. You can almost smell it. Cut to the year 2020 and it's as though someone at Square Enix has bottled your imagination from 23 years ago and emptied it all over the screen in 4K. I mean, what an undertaking. The interior of this Mako Reactor just feels right. It's expanded, yes, and you can poke around and gorp at environmental details and fan-pleasing Easter eggs, but this is what I imagined when I played Final Fantasy VII back in the day. An intimidating, cavernous chamber, the planet's lifeblood churning, sickened and green underneath walkways of cold, corroded metal. The thump of that score that seems less like musical accompaniment and more just a natural part of the air in here. What I love is they haven't just made the reactor bigger for the sake of size. They're making narrative use of all that lovely extra space. Environmental details give the area extra life. When you escape the reactor after the boss fight with Scorpion Sentinel, it looks like you've just had a boss fight with Scorpion Sentinel. The place is lit up, scarred and burning. There's gameplay worked into the design as well. Balconies, ledges, platforms, windows and pillars have been placed with combat in mind. A fact that means combat in here feels tactically different than the combat on the streets of Midgar. And then I got to play around inside the Sector 5 reactor. In the original Final Fantasy VII, this place was essentially indistinguishable from its Sector 1 counterpart, save for a few flips in perspective. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, however, you're in a different place.
Different reactor, different layout. Depends when it was built.
And look at it now. Beautiful, especially the now incredibly cool pipe grinding intro.
Kinda scary, huh?
It's all in the mind.
And before you ask, yes, the bit where you will have to flip the switches at the exact same moment is in here. It's funny, and I recommend bodging it a few times just to listen to all the hilarious dialogue they've recorded.
Okay, guys. You know what we have to do.
Copy me?
No, Tifa leads.
Oh, fine. After you, girl.
Number 2. Combat. The most obvious shift from the original is your ability to swing swords and fists, dodge, block and fire off Barrett's gun arm in real time. This setup is anchored by an evolved form of the ATB system from the original. Fight and your gauge fills up. When it's full, you can issue menu-based commands while the action swoops into stylish slow-mo.
So, naturally, everyone has one of two questions.
Either, so is this just a hack and slash, or is the real-time stuff just padding out the battles until your gauges fill and you can use abilities and magic? In my experience, the answer to both of these questions is no. Firstly, if you're a fan of the original and are worried the game is now just flailing about with the Buster Sword, may I draw your attention to the Scorpion Sentinel boss fight in the remake versus in the original. In the latter, this fight, to be honest, is an absolute cakewalk. All you have to do is not attack it while its tail is in the air, and you've pretty much won the fight.
In Final Fantasy VII Remake, however, flippin' heck, you have to be on your toes.
Your first task will be to stagger it. Do this by hitting it with lightning magic and also Cloud's focused thrust attack, an ability that doesn't do as much damage as Braver, but is more effective at increasing an enemy's stagger meter. Then you've got to contend with the barrier it throws up to defend itself. The only way to get rid of that is to have Cloud get round the back and hit the generator, but watch out for its horrible area of effect lightning attack and its stabbing tail. Otherwise,
get your Phoenix Downs out.
Meanwhile, you'll need Barrett for when it scuttles across the walls out of reach and fires rockets down at you like the big metal coward it is. But yes, bottom line, the combat in Final Fantasy VII Remake, as far as I'm concerned, requires even more thought than in the original. It's not just a case of hitting enemies with their elemental weaknesses. You have to manage where you are on the battlefield, be aware of what your party members are doing, tweak your materia setup to give yourself the best chance of victory.
Oh yeah, materia. That's slightly different as well.
I mean, fans of the original will immediately know what's what, and you can still equip materia in slots on your weapons and armour, but there are some differences. For example, each character in the build we played can equip one piece of summon magic. This has a designated slot all of its own and isn't dependent on your weapons or armour. Once summoned, Ifrit, Shiva, Leviathan or whoever it is fight alongside you in battle. You can issue them ATB based commands, but aside from that they will fight independently, performing spectacular moves before departing the battlefield.
There's also entirely new materia that makes excellent use of the real-time combat.
Deadly Dodge was one of my favourites, a piece of materia that allows you to perform a brutal physical attack immediately after dodging. And this is where people asking that other question should have their fears allayed. Is all the dodging and real-time sword swinging just padding out the action until your ATB gauge is full? Absolutely not. One particular fight that sticks in my mind is this one, against an elite Shinra trooper called the Huntsman. No problem, I thought, I'll just smash him to bits with my Buster Sword. After being buffeted by his shield and thrown to the floor with next to no hit points, I soon thought differently. You've got to get in round the back of this guy, time your dodges well, and open up his defences. Playing this bit felt like I was playing, a proper action game. Once your ATB gauge is full, a bit of fire magic, then a successful stagger, and then you can finish him. The real-time elements flow into the more traditional ATB system beautifully, and you'll need both dexterity and tactical awareness to master the combat entirely. And it's tough. Even Final Fantasy veterans are probably going to find themselves staring at 1 or 2 game over screens before the end credits roll. Heck, I got wiped by Abzu, I'll admit it. More on him later.
Entry 3, the music, which, if I had to pick, is the one element of Final Fantasy VII Remake that impresses me the most.
It's not just the original soundtrack remastered. The Scorpion Sentinel track in particular is a glorious fusion of the original game's bombing mission theme and the iconic Those Who Fight Further boss riff, and it sounds breathtaking. I could honestly listen to this all day. But also I love how you've got music that dynamically shifts gears depending on your situation. So as Cloud and Barrett infiltrate the Sector 1 reactor, the theme ups in tempo as you enter combat.
It's like the music has evolved with the game. You no longer have separate screens for battle and exploration.
And so the score transitions seamlessly alongside the action. Don't worry though, the original battle music is still in there and sounds amazing, and even this has made its way in. Barrett taking a leaf out of Prompto's book there. One last thing about the music as we segue into our next point. Did you notice the hint of Sephiroth's theme during the intro cinematic? Absolutely beautifully ominous, like a shadow attaching itself to the light of hope that is Aerith's theme. And Sephiroth is what or who I want to talk about next. In the original Final Fantasy VII, you didn't see him for hours. He was like an ominous whisper. Characters like President Shinra sort of mentioning him in passing, almost as though he's tiptoeing through the foothills of Sephiroth's mountainous presence. In the remake, his presence is more keenly felt. As we've just seen, even the intro cinematic carries a stir of his iconic one-winged angel theme. And looking at previously released trailers, it's clear Sephiroth haunts Cloud from the off.
We know that part 1 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake story is set entirely in Midgar, which did initially have me worried that we might not be seeing Sephiroth at all.
But with the story being significantly expanded, it's clear we will encounter everyone's favourite big bad sooner rather than later. We don't yet know how significant a role he plays in part 1 of Final Fantasy VII Remake, but we can't wait to find out. Entry 5, the characters. What a task this is, taking a cast so beloved by players and reinventing them for the modern age. This could have gone so very wrong. In a way, this is almost like when you see a movie adaptation of characters from one of your favourite novels. The original Final Fantasy VII had text boxes and sprites with expressive yet simple animation, and so most of who these characters are is in our imagination. Their voices, their personalities, how they look, how they fight and move. And somehow the team behind Final Fantasy VII Remake has just nailed it.
And it's not just voice acting and prettier graphics that bring the characters to life either.
It's in their animation, how they walk, subtle facial expressions. There's a wonderful bit I played where Jessie tells Cloud something he's done was really cool. Cloud gave her a look that was like, yeah, no big deal, but you could also see in his face a sort of reluctant triumph, a barely concealed smile, his stoic, cool guy facade melting just enough to give you a peek at the insecure, desperate to impress young man underneath.
It took the original Final Fantasy VII tens of hours to reveal Cloud's true character. Remake gives you a glimpse of him in a 1-second glance.
I'll admit to being really quite worried when 7 Remake was announced all those years ago at E3. How are they going to do the characters? Will they get the voices right? Will they get the looks right? The clothes, the animation,
Yep, they've nailed it all. Don't worry about it.
The incidental dialogue too is just wonderful. The characters feel so fleshed out. You're getting to know them every second you're in control. Their personalities are in the way they walk, the way they look at each other, the way they throw sarcastic comments about while exploring, the manner in which they fight.
Controlling Tifa and pulling off some of her moves just feels amazing.
The way she sort of limbers up for a punch, sharp, energetic, and thoroughly confident in her ability to deck whatever's in front of her, be it a giant mech with a saw or an overly aggressive pig thing that lives in a sewer. I've said it before, but Final Fantasy VII Remake is so much more than just a bigger, prettier version of the original game. It's constantly telling its story, with its music, with its animation, with its environment. Which leads us neatly onto entry 6, the City of Midgar. We're seeing a lot more of Midgar in the remake, and not just in terms of now you can walk down this street and climb over this building. I mean, yes, you can explore more of it than before, but what I'm talking about here is the city in terms of a place where actual people live. You know, you blow up the Sector 1 reactor in the original Final Fantasy VII and just stroll back to Sector 7, whistling, do-do-do, whatever, the steampunk equivalent of a nuclear reactor has just exploded, don't even worry about it.
In Remake, you get to experience the effect this has on people.
It's kind of terrifying. You emerge onto the streets, people are scared, being evacuated, looking for loved ones, mourning the loss of their property, their livelihoods, the enormous smoking ruin of the reactor, retching its toxic legacy high into the Midgar sky. At no point in the original did I ever question Avalanche's righteousness. Remake, however, wants you to feel a bit uncomfortable. Even though Shinra are undoubtedly the real villains, the fact the game shifts focus to the impoverished, the displaced, the struggling underclass of the city is enough to make you think about your place in this story. Also, prowling the streets of Midgar as Cloud, music pumping, chopping down Shinra grunts while wearing the flower Aerith gave you, feels pretty damn special. Okay, circling back to the boss fights for our final entry, because they need to be talked about. I fought Scorpion Sentinel, Airbuster and Abzu during my hands-on, and flippin' heck are they tough! Scorpion Sentinel does not mess about. As first bosses go, it's like taking the Welcome to Final Fantasy VII Remake road sign and smacking you round the head with it.
I've since learned the build we played back at E3 last year was set to easy difficulty, which makes a lot of sense because now we're playing on normal and...
Yeah, stay on your toes. Pay attention to what your opponent is doing. Don't get caught by his area of effect attacks. Get in, do your damage, get out. Keep Barrett at range at all times, and for goodness sake, guard when he fires those rockets at you. Even so, Scorpion Sentinel was a walk in the park compared to the other two. Airbuster, who you fight on that iconic T-shaped reactor bridge, just like in the original, will give you one hell of a fight. At one point I got caught by its mega kill everything laser beam, 2 characters wiped instantly. I had Barrett limping about throwing Phoenix downs like a madman, trying to keep Cloud and Tifa alive long enough to heal them up properly. And the music, oh the music is so good. It's like the original, only better.
Better. It's just better. There's no other word for it.
Your blood will be pumping both from that and the fact you'll constantly be flirting with the game over screen, dancing inches from death. The pressure system is really crucial here. Momentum in these battles can flip in a moment and you need to make the most of those times you are on top. Knocking bosses over, hitting them with attacks they're weak against, staggering them and then hammering home your advantage before running back for cover is the way to go. Against Abzu, I got a game over, I'll admit it. Cloud and Tifa got caught in his devastating tsunami attack and wiped instantly. I mean, look how tame it is in the original compared to this. Aerith couldn't revive them quick enough and quickly followed them to the graveyard. I played it again and won just. I had Aerith constantly helping out Cloud and Tifa with support and restorative magic, switching in to control the latter two only when the stagger window opened.
It's worth mentioning you can issue commands to the 2 characters you are not controlling whenever their ATB gauge is full.
Honestly, it was exhilarating in a way the original only was in my mind. And by that, I mean the Final Fantasy VII that existed when I talked about it with my friends on the school playground, or when I played it through in my head before going to sleep. This Final Fantasy VII had Cloud and Tifa leaping through the air, dodging a rampaging boss and his enormous attacks before finishing the fight with an epic Braver attack. The original almost acts like a tabletop game in this sense, painting a stylized picture of reality with a turn-based brush, each menu-based command a dice roll that sparks 1,000 images in your mind. What you imagine is more than what's actually there. That's where the magic of Final Fantasy VII came from for me. Final Fantasy VII Remake is what I dreamt as a kid. The moves I imagined Tifa and Cloud pulling off, when really all they did was this. are now actually playing out in front of you. Remake's boss fights are the epic titanic struggles that blazed through my 11-year-old brain when I played the original game. They are tough, beautiful, breathless and spectacular, and I honestly can't wait to see what else the game has in store. Hopefully more of Ifrit sending Abzu packing with a devastating fire attack pulled straight from whatever circle of hell he calls home. So there you are, 7 differences we are totally on board with. Sorry for talking your ear off about Final Fantasy VII Remake again, but I love this game loads and cannot help myself. I'm off to enjoy the demo again. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think of the game, the bosses, the combat system, the characters in the comments. Give us a like if you enjoyed the video and join us again next week for a Friday feature that will be about 7 totally non-Final Fantasy related things, I promise. See you then.
For the players.